Hi, Namaste, children, once again. Back to the discussion. Today I am going to present you the video lecture on the second lesson from our history, that is Kings, Farmers and Towns, the Early States and Economies from 6th century BC to 6th century AD. And before that, let me congratulate all the students who have actively involved in the learning process of the video lecture which I have presented from chapter number 1. And it is very happy to note that almost all of you have involved and you have prepared questions, and it has been forwarded by your respective leaders to me, and this is a good attempt. But even then, I could see there are a few exceptions. One or two students still they have to be active, or they have to actively take part in the learning process. And definitely, I assure you that this type of learning will help you to be more familiar with the content of history for the final examination when you are appearing for the board examination. Yes, let's come back to the discussion. Now, a few tips from the second chapter I would like to give you. Now, one thing you have to understand that this chapter, the period is different from that of the previous one. Now, this is taken from 6th century BC to 6th century AD. Now, before we start the discussion, we should understand some introductory notes, some general points which will definitely help you to understand this chapter. What are they? There are several developments in India which took place after the Harappan civilization for a period of 1200 years. That means during these 1200 years of history, that is from 6th century to BC to 6th century AD, we can see that there are a lot of development or advancement which took place in the history of India. What are they? Number one, the first Vedic textbook, which is called as the Rig Veda, was composed by the Aryans during this period only. The second one, the agricultural settlements emerged in India. As you know that in the previous chapter you have learned that the agriculture was mainly confined within the area of Indus region. Now, when you are coming to this period, we can see that the agriculture was expanded from Indus region toward the Gangetic plain. That means almost all parts of the North Indian plain was occupied with the agriculture settlement. Then the third point, we can say that there is an evidence of pastoral population in the Deccan and further souths. When you are coming to the central and southern part of India, you can see that the cattle rearing population, they are expanding or reaching there, and they started to occupy those places with their own occupation. Then the fourth point is the emergence of megaliths, the new modus of disposal of the dead emerged in central and south India. And in many cases, these dead were buried with a rich range of iron tools and weapons. What is megalith? It is a huge block of stone which was placed over the burial site, particularly for the important person's burial site, to give some indication or identification. It was used. These sort of things was developed during this time only. Then another thing what you have to say that during 6th century BC, there is an evidence of the emergence of early states, empires and kingdoms. You know that during the Indus Valley civilization, we couldn't find such an empire or powerful king or kingdom. Why? Because there the population was very limited. So the people, almost all of them were very happily, without any differentiation, they were living. But it may be what we can assume that the number of population might have been increased. When the number of population increased, there is a chance of what is called the competition for acquisition of the land and other resources. So the powerful people must have survived, and they were able to capture or control the rest of the population. As a result, some powerful kingdoms and empires or the states which were emerged, this also happened during this time. And the next point is that the new towns appeared almost throughout the subcontinent. You know, we can see that throughout the Indian subcontinent, we can see that most of the parts, new towns and cities were emerged. That is also what is called an indication of the development of human history. So by taking these points into our mind, we can very easily enroll into the chapter of number 2 from history. Now, next. In the previous lesson, we have seen that the sources. Here also, first, before we are learning, we should know what kind of sources are available before us to learn about this chapter. The historians attempt to understand by drawing on a range of sources the inscription, the text, the coins, and visual materials. My dear children, you can see there is a difference between the sources which we are using for the second chapter with the first chapter. In the first chapter, we were able to get only the archaeological sources because the script was not deciphered. While you are coming over to the second chapter, you can see that we are able to get a plenty of resources, including both the agricultural as well as the literary sources. That is the most significant aspect of this area. Now, here one important terms we have to keep it in our mind, that is the epigraphy. What is epigraphy? We should know, and sometimes some of you might be knowing. The epigraphy is the study of inscription. Dear students, because during this period of history, to learn about this history, the historian use a large number of inscriptions. And this inscription, if someone is studying it, it is called, that process is called as the epigraphy. So the epigraphical information is also useful to understand this chapter. Now, who is this James Prinsep? He was an archaeologist. He was an archaeological as well as an English East India Company officer. He was very much concerned or interested in learning the history of India. In the same way, in the previous chapter also, one or two archaeologists' name we are supposed to learn that I couldn't tell you. And for your information, I must recall that Alexander Cunningham and John Marshall. These two leaders or these two officers or archaeologists, they have contributed much for deciphering the civilization of the Indus Valley, particularly John Marshall. That while reading the chapter you will understand. And here James Prinsep, he has made a big contribution in the field of Indian history. What he did, let us see. Some momentous development in Indian epigraphy which was taking place in 1830s, because at that time James Prinsep was available here. It was his contribution only made. This was when James Prinsep, an officer of the East India Company, who deciphered the Brahmi and Kharosthi script used in the earliest inscriptions and coins. And this opened a new chapter in the history of India. He found that most of these mentioned a king referred to as Piyadasi, meaning pleasant to behold, and there were a few inscriptions which also referred to the king as Ashoka. And what he did, you know that the Brahmi and Kharosthi scripts, that is the second point, he was an officer of English East India Company who deciphered the Brahmi and Kharosthi script. You know, the Brahmi and Kharosthi script was mostly used during the Ashoka's period. And the meaning of this was not known to us. It was only in 1830s, after the intervention of James Prinsep only, these scripts' meaning was deciphered. This in turn helped all the scholars or many historians to go for learning more and more information which was available with the inscriptions. Now he found, as I said, you know that, and what James Prinsep found that, and most of the inscription, it is mentioned about a king, it was Ashoka. And Ashoka's name was mentioned here. After a lot of effort only he could reveal these truths to the world. And this gave, what gave? James Prinsep's effort gave a new direction to early Indian political history, as scholars used these inscriptions and text in a variety of languages to reconstruct the past history. So the role of James Prinsep in understanding the period of history after Indus Valley civilization is very, very, very important. Next. Now I would like to take your attention to the 6th century. Why? Because this chapter's period is taken from 6th century BC to 6th century AD. what makes why 6th century is taken as a turning point or a beginning part of this chapter, because the 6th century BC is very, very important in Indian history, not only in India, but all over the world. It is highly significant. But as far as the Indian context is concerned, why 6th century BC is a turning point? Because it can be asked for your examination, and many times it was asked also. Moreover, this question will be repeated one after another again in the succeeding chapters also. So please do not forget about that. Some points you may please see that. Why this 6th century BC is a turning point? Number one, it was this period, there was a rise of early states, the cities, the growing use of iron, the development of coinage. My dear children, during this period, a large number of states, the iron, which was much harder than that of any other material, and also the coin system was also introduced. These features we cannot see with the Indus Valley civilization. Now, the second point, what you can see that there was a diverse system of thought, including Buddhism and Jainism. A new approach, new thinking was developed in the form of Buddhism and Jainism, which happened in 6th century only. The third one is that the rise of 16 Mahajanapadas, and most of them were ruled by the kings only. Now, what is Mahajanapada? I will come to you later. And Janapadas and Mahajanapadas. When some Janapadas become very powerful, it is called Mahajanapadas. I will come to you later. And some of these Mahajanapadas were known as Ganas or Sanghas. It is maybe a republican form. It was mostly ruled by the oligarchy, is ruled by not a single person, by a group of people. Another important aspect, both Mahavira and Buddha, they are related to Jainism and Buddhism. They belong to these Ganas or Mahajanapadas only. That is the reason why their ideas were little more broadened, which is different from that of the Brahmanical ideas. And some states were lasting for nearly thousands of years. That means some of the Mahajanapadas were very powerful, and so it could last for quite long time. Then each Mahajanapada had a capital city which was often fortified. That means every Mahajanapada had a capital city, a center of administration, which was well protected with what is called a fort. And another point is that for the first time, the Brahmins began composing a new text. It is called Dharma Sutra, which mentions certain rules and regulations for how to rule the society or different categorization of people to maintain their supremacy in the society. So Dharma Shastra, and one more term will be there, Dharma Sutra. Both these are certain rules and regulations prescribed by Brahmins to take their dominance over the society, that it will come in course of time. Now, what is Janapada? I said, very simple only. Janapada is a land where a Jana, a people, a clan or tribe sets its foot or settlers. It is a word used in both Prakriti and Sanskrit, because Prakriti language was used by Ashoka and Sanskrit was used by the Brahmanical community. Now, my dear children, we have to understand that Janapada simply means a big land area where Janam or people are settled. That's all. Now, another important area. Magadha to become the most powerful Mahajanapada. My dear students, there were 16 Mahajanapadas. Among them, Magadha was becoming the most powerful one. How it happened? It is because of certain favorable factors which could help this empire to become very popular. Now let us see. It is a very important question you can expect for the examination. And what are the reasons which led Magadha to become the most powerful Mahajanapada? Let us see. Between 6th and 4th century BC, Magadha, that is in the present day Bihar region, it became the most powerful Mahajanapada. The reasons are, number one, agriculture was very productive in this region. Second one, iron mines which were accessible and provided the resources for tools and weapons. As you know, the iron was not available in the previous time in Indus Valley. So iron is much harder than any other metals. This could make them some strong tools and implements which could further enlarge their agriculture in large areas. Then another important advantage is elephant, which was one of the most important parts of their army, were found abundantly in the forest region of Mauryan Empire. The next one, the Ganga river and its tributaries provided the cheap and convenient communication so that very easily they could make long distance communication and trade activities, which made them more and more a flourished stage. Then another important one, some popular rulers, they were ruling this empire. And some of the important rulers who were the part of this empire were Bimbisara, Ajatashatru, Mahapadmananda, even the founder Chandragupta Maurya, and later none other than Ashoka, the greatest ever ruler of ancient Indian history. Then another important advantage is the Mauryan Empire had a powerful capital city. Initially, it had established its headquarters in Rajagriha, and later it was shifted to Pataliputra, and these two places are important for locating in the map that we will come later. And these powerful capital cities made this kingdom little more flourished in the ancient period of history. Now, coming over to the next area, we can see that what kind of sources are available for us to understand about the Mauryan history. This is also one question you can expect for the examination, the sources of Mauryan Empire. There are many sources, both archaeological as well as literary sources are there. The first one is the archaeological sources, especially the sculptures which were contributed during the time of Ashoka. The literary aspects are very important. We can see that there are three areas we can see. Number one, it is an account of Megasthenes. Who was Megasthenes? Who was a foreigner who was deputed as an ambassador, as a Greek ambassador to the kingdom of Chandragupta Maurya. And after reaching here, he wrote a book which is called as the Indica. The Indica, and this book gives us a lot of information about the Mauryan Empire. The next one is a very, very important source, that is what is called the Arthashastra. Most of you might be knowing this book was composed by and Chandragupta Maurya's chief minister Kaudilya or Chanakya, and it was with the help of Chanakya this empire was established by Chandragupta Maurya. Then also we are getting some other literary information from Buddhist literature, the Jain literature, and the Puranic, Hindu Puranic literature also is available as the literary source of information to understand about the Mauryan Empire. And finally, the inscriptions of Ashoka. As you know, what is the specialty of inscriptions of Ashoka? He was the first ruler who inscribed his messages to his subjects, people and officials on stone surface. The stone was selected to project his information, and it could last long, or for a long period it could survive. That is the reason why he was the first emperor practiced this system in our country. And the last one is the policy of Ashoka, which is known as Ashoka's Dhamma. What is Ashoka's Dhamma? It is the special identity of his empire, that is the peaceful policy or non-violent method of approach. The policy of Ashoka Dhamma include the respect towards elders, generosity towards Brahmanas and those who renounce the worldly life, the treating slaves and servants very kindly, and also respect for religions and traditions other than one's own religion. That means in generally or in totality, there was a complexity of good values were associated with the policy of Dhamma adopted by Ashoka. And this Ashoka Dhamma also gives an indication that how this Mauryan Empire was ruling with the support of people for quite a long time. Now, the next one is what is called the administrative feature of Mauryan Empire. That and all, we will discuss in the next module. Thank you.